Hello, this is Mr. Roos again, and now I'm going to show you guys the next step in your puzzle cube project. We're going to do an actual assembly of the cube. So now, up to this point, we have actually physically built this cube project out of wooden cubes. We have now drawn each part in the Inventor program, and now we're going to put that into an assembly. So you're actually going to end up with a finished product that looks like this. Now I'm going to go back and forth and use this as a reference for me because sometimes I can get kind of confused with what the puzzle pieces go together while I'm trying to assemble it on the computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to open a file, new, called Standard IAM, stands for Inventor Assembly. So the first thing we have to do is we actually have to bring in all of our parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Place Component, and it's going to open up. I've already been working in here, so it's going to open up automatically. And I'm going to choose the 5 parts for this puzzle. This one right here is not going to be chosen because it was just the one I used as a reference when we first started drawing. So if I hold Shift, I can choose each and every part for the puzzle. And I'm going to say Open. It's going to bring all my pieces into my work area. Now, I can see everything that I have built right here in front of me. I can choose each part individually and move them around, so it's a little easier for me to know which part I'm working with and where I want to grab each part. If I choose this cube, it moves all of them as a whole. In the position area up on the toolbar in the ribbon, I have free move and free rotate. Free rotate, I will choose each part and I can manipulate its position on the screen individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by first free moving and then free rotating these parts into how I want to put them together. The way we assemble these is using a constraint just like geometric constraints, but these are three-dimensional. We're going to use a constraint and we're going to basically assemble these parts. In constraint, I have multiple different options, but right now all we're going to use today is the mate constraint. Within the mate constraint, you have 2 options. You have mate and you have flush. Mate, I like to explain to my learners that imagine you're taking 2 faces and you're gluing them together. The flush constraint means you're taking 2 faces and you're making them even with one another. Every part has multiple different ranges in which they can rotate along the X, Y, and Z axis. There actually is 6 degrees of freedom. You can actually go on the X, Y, and Z axis, moving linear, and then they're actually rotational. So to constrain a part fully, you must constrain it in all 3 axes so the part doesn't move. Let's go and show you what I'm talking about. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mate constraint, and this green and black cube have to go together. I'm going to choose this face and this face right here, and it's going to snap together. I'm going to say apply. Now, what that does is it basically glued that face to this face, but now it still moves along 2 other degrees of freedom. We have to fully constrain this part from moving. So I'm going to choose to constrain again, and I'm going to use the flush tool this time. Do you think it's done? It looks done, but it's not. This part can still move this direction. Now I have 2 ways in which I can constrain this fully. I can flush this face to this face, or I can mate this face to the inside of this part. But it's much easier than trying to rotate to this side to see the inside there and the outside here. I'm just going to choose the flush constraint again. One thing I make my students do is I always make them grab one part and move it and see if anything comes apart. That will determine whether or not the part is fully constrained. So what I'm going to do now is you're going to pay attention, you're going to follow me along. I'm just going to rebuild this entire thing together. So next one I'm going to choose is the pink cube. I'm going to free rotate this just a little bit so it looks like it's going to go together that way. What I'm going to choose now is I'm going to mate this face to this little stub down here, to the inside of this piece. I will now flush this edge to here. Now it looks like it didn't move, but it actually did, because it's still in it's a weird looking realm, but the parts are together. Now if you look, this can go like this and like this, but it's still not going to be fully constrained until I put this final constraint to it. So what I will do is I will mate this face to this bottom face. And now if I click on this and I try and move it, everything moves together. We are fully constrained. I'll take this part now. I believe it goes like this. Excuse me. Now if we want to look and see what constraints we have on that part, we can click on the part, and over here in the browser it'll show me I have a flush and I have a mate. Now all I have to do is constrain this flush from here to here. Double check to make sure nothing moves, and we are good. Now I have one more part left to move. So now what I want to do is I'm going to mate this face here to this face here. I can then mate this face to this face. Apply. And if you look, it comes back here. And I'm just going to flush here and here. And we will double check. Everything looks like it's a solid cube now. Let's grab a part and make sure nothing moves by itself, and it looks to be like a solid. Now, when we put this into a drawing, which I'll show you next, when we put it into an IPN, one thing I like to do is I like to choose and make this my cube over here in the corner. I want to make them match. So what I'll do is I'll click on the zoom all, and I'm sorry, not the zoom all. I want to look at the look at. I'll look at this face and its front, which is good. But if it was, say that the cube was off a little bit, I chose free rotate. Nope, that's not what I want to do. Say the cube was not directly correlated, like in the same instance, like this cube didn't match this cube, and I wanted to, I would look at this face right here. I would then right click on this, and I would set this as my current front. So now, whenever I change a view, the cube automatically changes exactly to what this matches.